My goodness. We'll convene the meeting. Public comments. Is there anyone from the public wishing to address us this morning? Seeing no one step up to the podium, approval of minutes?
So moved.
First? Second? You got it? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Consent. Anything to be pulled from consent?
Move approval.
First?
Second.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Point of clarification, do I vote on the minutes or?
You can.
You can. I think you can vote on this. Moving right on along, 9-0, regular agenda items, legislative update.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I'll give you a brief update on federal legislation, and then I'll turn it over to Mark Watts to talk about what's happening at the state and regional level. So really quickly, as you may recall, we have a waiver from NHTSA to operate the Easy Mile shared autonomous vehicles on public roads. That was part of the requirements for the California bill for us to run our pilot program. That waiver does expire sometime in spring of this year, so we've already reached back out to NHTSA to request an extension of that waiver to continue our pilot program. So we're waiting to hear back officially that we have that extension. Informally, we have some indication that should happen very smoothly and very shortly. Also, we're watching very closely what's happening with the infrastructure plan between the memo that was leaked from the current Trump administration and the State of the Union. Two things are becoming fairly clear. The first is that there's really a big push to streamline project delivery and find ways to deliver projects faster. Secondly, it's fairly clear that states and localities are going to need to come to the table with some sort of their own funding source to be able to fully leverage a lot of the options that are out there. So the details are still a little fuzzy. Our lobbyists are watching it very closely for us and kind of waiting for the official plan to be released. But I think the fact that we currently have a sales tax puts us potentially in a better position than some of the other places around the country for that. Lastly, we are in a continuing resolution through February 8th, waiting to see if Congress will pass an actual budget. Currently, the actual budget still contains money for autonomous vehicle proving grounds, of which Gomentum Station would be eligible. That's still a line item in the potential budget to be passed. So we are also watching that fairly closely to see what happens. So that's just kind of a high-level review, and I'm happy to answer any questions before we move on to the state portion.
I would just add a little bit. I met with DOT last week. Also met with a guy in the big office, and they revealed, just to amplify a little bit, that the absolute maximum they might be able to find for infrastructure bill is $200 billion. But it may be money that already exists because the deficit is so big based on the tax plan that was passed. They admit they're not going to have money. They've also asked all the senators to give them a list through the governor of projects that they might want to list. And the only ones who are going to consider the ones that have high funding sources already, because the math that they're going to get to is not federal money. When they say they're doing a $1.5 billion transportation bill, it's counting everybody else's money. And they admit that's the only way they're going to get to it. At the state level, if we're trying to get something and we're not on that list, you're not going to get on that list. That we really would have to reach out to Feinstein. I don't know that how Kamala Harris or other senators involved, but Dianne Feinstein is really involved in putting together that list, as well as the governor's office. Oh, there it goes.
I'm not laughing at you. I just couldn't see you.
Yeah, okay. Now, see the light.
I saw the light, but I couldn't see you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Randy.
The other thing is on the Tiger grants and things like that. Boy, their criteria for some states is a little tougher than others, and they're pretty straightforward about that. But you know what? I'm related project, but it's not in our transportation, the BART to Livermore Ace train. That's considered a higher priority project now, because it has $550 million.
Right.
So they're going after anything that says it's got high funding. But I don't think that should discourage us. I think we ought to jump in with those projects that we have with whatever money we can show. And you never know, because the other thing is they're going to allow, and they're not publicly saying it, but they did admit the first draft of DOT kind of deal, it's theirs. They leaked it. It's changed. And they were just sort of doing it to see what kind of interest they would get. But they're bringing back earmarks before November. And they just said they have to. That's just that. And regardless of what your philosophy is, we should take advantage of whatever we think we can get. So if for our Highway 4-680 interchange, if we were short because of the amount of money we have, that's a high priority project they would look at. And it would not be a grant basis. It wouldn't be that. Because on a grant basis for a Tiger grant, if there are 50 items on the checklist, you need to score 100% in every one. And then you have a minus 10% already because of the state forefront. So we would have to, it's going to be really challenging to get those. But there's an opportunity, given the climate of people wanting outcomes to go their way, that we might be able to take advantage.
Other questions? You got your light on, Connor. Okay. I guess the question I would ask, obviously, if we don't pass a budget, which looks pretty honest at this period of time, what does that do to our monies for momentum? Is it just held up
For anything.
for anything? Do you still proceed, or do we shut things? Do we also shut down?
So the money that I mentioned here is $100 million for the U.S. DOT approved autonomous vehicle test facilities.
Right.
And still to be determined how we would potentially compete for that. So it doesn't exist until
it
they
doesn't
pass a
even
budget
exist.
with it. Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
it'll be the first time it's included.
Got it.
And the budgets are continued through CRs, continued resolutions. And the last budget impasse, it was how many CRs? 12?
Something like
Oh,
that.
my
Something like
goodness.
12. So they keep
They
extending.
just keep extending.
Yeah, there's no new money. They just keep extending. And then they finally develop a budget.
All right. Yes, sir.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here today, Chair and members. I just have several quick items I want to run through you, including one new bill that we'll put on the list to bring back to you more formally, but I just want to give you a little heads up on it. But starting off, yesterday was the deadline in the legislature for bills that had been introduced last year that hadn't passed their House of Origin to get out. So anything that was still in the Assembly, that was introduced in the Assembly or the Senate, introduced in the Senate last year, now dies and goes to the Secretary of State's office. So the focus for the legislature has been trying to move the bills that out of the remainders to get them to the other house so they can get them scheduled in the coming year. The other notable date coming up is 2 weeks from tomorrow is the date by which 2018 bills have to be introduced. It's a really slow pace to date. There's only been, since January 3rd, like 400 plus bills, with typically there's a total between the two houses of over 2,000 bills. So you can see we're going to get a ramp up in the next 2 weeks if custom is observed. One piece of interesting news, today is the first day for former California State Transportation Agency Secretary Brian Kelly to start his new job as the CEO of the High Speed Rail Authority. And in his place is somebody that Tim Hale and Randy and I have been working with as acting secretary, Brian Annis, and he was cooperative in the Gomentum funding agreement and all that. It still took a number of months to get there, but he was cooperative throughout the process. So we look forward to working with him through the remainder of this administration. The other remarkable or notable item that occurred during this past month was the governor's budget was released, and it now, as we reflected on it and read through it, we realized that the full amount, first full year full amount of SB1 is in that budget for 2018-19 budget year. and we'll see how that goes. Part of that was a hint in the budget release by the governor that he would have more details on what to do with cap and trade funding. And if you remember, in any one year, 60% of the cap and trade is continuously appropriated to programs like transit, intercity rail, transit operations, affordable housing, and sustainable community funding, and then 40% is retained for proposal in the budget. We were waiting anxiously to see what that 40% was going to look like. He did touch on it a bit, and some more detail is provided in the State of the State. It's about $1.2 billion, and the focus is on accelerating EV deployment in the state, whether it's commercial electric vehicles, but largely light duty vehicles that the motoring public buys, charging facilities, rebates, and the like. There's a number of other things in other program areas outside of transportation, electronic vehicles, but the lion's share is dedicated to that purpose. So I'm picking up that the legislature may or may not go along with that, so we may be in for some long discussions starting pretty quickly over what to put into that 40% of the cap and trade. I mention it that way because the 60% is being directly allocated to those programs that fund transportation and intercity rail and transit operations. Also, I'm sure some of you were in attendance or monitoring, but the MTC did approve the BATA or the RM3 getting ahead of myself, approved requesting the county's registrars to place the measure on the June ballot. And that's being followed up with the development of information materials by MTC and MTC staff, and that's being shared region-wide. So that's on the move at this point in time. And lastly, the bill I mentioned at the beginning, Mr. Grayson has introduced a bill that's already got some notoriety, but I think it's a bill that you'll want to take a close look at, and we'll put it on the matrix for the next month for your consideration. And the measure would simply, it was an idea that he picked up from the CTC's annual report. And in that, they recommended judicial relief for against CEQA lawsuits for projects. And what he's done is pegged it, if a project is in a sustainable community strategy, it would then have access to the judicial relief against a challenge at the end of the process, similar to the Sacramento Arena judicial relief element. And this just was introduced in the last couple of days. So it's already making the rounds, and we'll make sure that that's on because, A, it's good policy. It's in line with some of the things we were looking at. It doesn't go as far as some of the discussions we had previously. And it's a local member, so there's all sorts of reasons to take a good hard look at that. And with that, I conclude my report.
Questions?
Thank you.
No, I'm not going to let you do it, but I
Okay.
ask you. Yeah, you got to give me an education. Since we're coming into election crazy season and new governor, new jostling for everything, is that going to in any way affect things on our level in regard, do you see some obstacle in this cloud?
I don't right now. You could, I guess, if you had delegation members with interest in supporting different candidates and trying to take advantage. But I've really never noticed that in the past, but that's something that could happen.
Oh, okay, but you don't.
But I'm not seeing any, no, I'm not. I'm not noticing anything that's different about this year. When you talk about propositions and some of the initiatives out there, things get a little bit more heated and interest, and there's a lot of work in the legislature to try to figure out how to prevent the repeal initiative from moving forward, but that's beneficial to us if that were to work out. So.
Oh, okay. Well,
Okay.
That's a good answer.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. 10-0, Interstate 680, high occupancy vehicle. Completion of express lanes.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. Ivan Ramirez, with construction manager. And this is an action item where we're asking you to recommend approval to the full board of the plan specification and estimate for the I-680 HOV extension and hot lane conversion project. The design is virtually complete, and as required by Public Contract Code, the board approves the plan specifications and estimate to preserve design immunity. In addition to that, we're asking you to approve Resolution 1806P, which authorizes the executive director to publicly advertise the contract at his discretion, approve changes, and issue addendum to the bidding documents during the advertisement period, and to publicly open all bids when received. Now, in order to accelerate construction, we are asking you to allow us to advertise the project. There's one or two actions that the CTC has to take at their March 21 and 22, 2018 meeting. One of them is to advance allocation of $15.57 million in STIP, which are currently programmed for the fiscal year 2019 or 2020, or to take action on an AB 3090, which arranges a reimbursement to utilize Measure J funds and with subsequent reimbursement in the fiscal year 2019 and 2020. Before you take the vote, I want to highlight something that has occurred since staff updated you during the fall regarding this project. At that time, it was anticipated that there was going to be a lane closure beginning at Rod Gear south for about a mile. Since we put the construction management firm on board, WSP, staff re-engaged with the designer, HDR. And by the way, the designers were here, Sheena with the black coat over there in the back, and we actually succeeded in eliminating that lane drop. So now that was anticipated to take 22 minutes off of the commute. So we no longer have to deal with that delay. There is a small risk because now the work has to occur at night that maybe a lane will pick up a little later. But other than that, I think it outweighs the benefit of having the lane drop completely occur. So with that, I'm open to any questions.
Questions?
Thank you for the explanation. Since we're getting into the AAA process deeper now, or advertise, award, and administer, and given a couple of our projects in the past, but one specifically where we had a set of contract documents that maybe weren't comprehensive enough and didn't cover enough things, what sort of peer review have we done of these contract documents to assure us that these are complete and that they're done? Because it's in the rush to get projects done, and in my business, you sometimes push them out the door. So just want to know. I know there's some lessons we're learning there, but so what are we doing to bring this up to a level that we think is what we want to see?
So we have a project out on I-680 San Pablo, which, like you mentioned, has a series of problems. So we're going to come back to the board to ask for additional funds in the near future, and we'll explain everything that's going wrong with it. But it wasn't just so there were some issues with the design, for sure, but there's also other issues that have occurred with that project that have increased the cost, including underground utilities that were not expected, the utilities that were supposed to show up and do transfers of power and so on, plans that they approved and really were not accurate, even though we gave them for approval. But normally what has worked really well for us is we bring the CM firm early enough. That's another issue that occurred in that project, is that because of the E76 approval, we couldn't get the firm in early enough to review the documents.
So that becomes our peer review, is to have
Right,
them to
right. So the construction firm, we pick them and they provide a constructability review. And one more item before I go on, we also have a program oversight construction person that we hired recently, and he's a former contractor. He's also performed constructability review,
great.
and he's going to continue to do that for us.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, thank you.
We've actually hired two. So both of their extended staff, their consultants, they're ex-contractors. And so they get in there and they pour over the plans and specs to make sure they're biddable and buildable. That's really that, and then the CM firm comes on at about 65% design. And then so we're assuming the risk because the risk is there and the benefits are greater if we do the work.
Yeah.
Because the savings then we put on the next project. And so we're trying to minimize the risk by hiring smarter.
This sounds like we're headed the right way. That's great. Good to hear that. Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
If it's appropriate, I'd move adoption of Resolution 18-06-B.
Second.
Have a first. Have
2
a
seconds.
2 seconds? But we'll take it. We'll choose one.
Ladies first.
Ladies first.
Ladies first?
We've been waiting on this project a long time.
Long time.
This is awesome.
Well, and also, I guess, just the comments I would make on this is that with our people on board going through, we're ahead of the curve. And is that going to stay all the time now? We're continuously? Well, no, I just want to I'm asking.
You're talking about the us AAA in these projects?
Yes.
As long as you approve that, yes.
Then
we think
better-
that's the way to do it. I mean, we've done.
No, that's the way
How
to
many
do
we've
it.
done? How many projects now? 5? 5 or 6. And so most of them came in. All the 4 projects came in about 6 months late because of weather, not rain, but heat and wind, if you remember. So the contractor took a little more time, but otherwise, if the pavement cracks, you dig all that stuff up. Your constituents drive by every day saying, we're going to pay for that again. So we didn't have any of that, but we waited. But it came in under budget. And then, as Ivan was saying, Interstate 80 at San Pablo has a lot of issues where they're filling in the bay to try to gain in the old days. I mean, utilities, we had a pipe burst. I mean, there's all kinds of issues out there along 80. Maybe we don't AAA any of those on 80 in the future. That would be the way to go.
All right, we have a first and a second. We'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There you go. 10-2.
Okay, I'm up next. Good morning, Chair Taylor and Commissioners. Susan Miller, Director of Projects. The authority entered into the contract with HDR in late 2017 to prepare development documents and environmental documents for the Express Lane project we were just speaking of, from converting the HOV system from the bridge down to just south of Rudgare in the southbound direction. So then in 2016, we amended their contract to include final design services for not only the Express Lane project, but also another project that had been completed with a different environmental document, and that's to close the gap in the carpool system through the vicinity of 24. It made a lot of sense to combine and have one designer do the whole project, and then to complete the construction so it could open as a managed lane, then to sync in with the lane that's in operation in the vicinity of Walnut Creek and Alamo in the south. Again, we're just talking about the southbound direction. As Ivan just reported, we're virtually complete with the design effort, and we're now working on final certifications and obtaining the encroachment permit through Caltrans. The HDR team has worked very hard to keep the project on schedule, and we are now requesting an amendment to their contract to deal with a larger effort than originally anticipated for significant comments that came in at 95% and even at 100%, where we received, in many cases, they were new comments coming in at 100%. So we worked very hard to get those resolved so we could maintain the schedule. Additionally, we did add some new scope items. We added a tree removal contract, which we bid separately in order to avoid the issue with nesting birds. We completed that. It's virtually complete. It was all done in 1 month in December. We're just closing out that contract now, so that was new scope that we added. We also added some additional public outreach to their contract, and we had a neighborhood meeting in Walnut Creek and a vicinity of, it was in Walnut Creek, but also invited the Alamo residents so we could give them a preview of the upcoming tree removal, but also on the broader project. So On this order, there's additional detail that's included in HDR's letter as attachment B. And this amendment includes enough budget for activities to get us through the bid process and to answer questions that may come up during that process. It also includes a conceptual re-landscaping plan. Our goal would be to do some additional outreach to the Alamo and Walnut Creek community in the spring and to come back with some concepts for landscaping. At that point in time, once we award the contract, we would be closing out the design contract and doing a new design services during construction with HDR, which is our typical process. We would then include the final design of the conceptual landscaping in their design services during construction contract. So we would be really in a position to, as soon as possible following the civil work and relief of maintenance on the civil work, be able to get out there and do that replanting. I do want to remind you that MTC is our partners on this project. We do have ARM2 and BAFA funds for the project, and we've been working very closely with them. They're also excited to see that we're getting to the point where it's going to enter into construction. So with that, staff would seek authorization for the chair to execute amendment number 5 to agreement number 376 with HDR in the amount of $750,000. This does include $200,000 in extra work contingency for a new total agreement value of $12,470,000. And as mentioned, we have Sheena Patel in the audience. She's the lead project engineer, and we also have Carl Hack, who is the project manager with HDR. And so we would all be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I don't have any questions. I'd move the item. This is the right move. It's actually an economical solution and not get another firm on board. So I think it's good advice.
Yeah, second that, and I'm glad we're in charge.
First and second, and we're glad we're in charge. So we'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. 11-0. I have an interest in this one.
Really?
Yes. State Route 4, Colony Bike Trail Pedestrian. Been working on this I've been on council 13 years, so.
Yeah, we're excited to be moving forward, and this morning we're asking your action for 2 items under agenda item 11. Actually, there are 2 items under this agenda item for McCamey Bicycle Pedestrian Overcrossing Project. The project, as Commissioner Taylor knows, is constructing a bicycle pedestrian bridge spanning over Highway 4 in Brentwood, and it will bridge an existing gap in the McCauley Trail that was created when Highway 4 bypass was constructed. The overcrossing was a planned component of the Highway bypass project. As we seek approval of these 2 agenda items this morning, we would like to provide a quick update for the project. You may recall that the project was put on hold at 65% design or after it was completed in 2014 because of funding shortfall. Since then, City of Brentwood is embarking on a specific plan effort for an area they are calling Priority Area 1, which includes the overcrossing location. This specific plan now identifies the area directly adjacent to the overcrossing as the future Brentwood Intermodal Transit Center. The transit center will include a bus transit facility that will be served by Tri-Delta Transit. Now the proposed trail crossing will be an essential piece of the area where we will be providing safe access for bicyclists and pedestrians to access the transit center. BART has been participating in the specific plan effort, and they support the advancement of the transit center under the condition that the trail overcrossing is constructed. In support of the overcrossing project, BART has agreed to be a funding partner, contributing $200,000 to help complete the design for the overcrossing. This brings us to agenda item number 11.1, which seeks authorization for the chair to execute Cooperative Agreement 05E.14 with BART. The co-op memorializes the roles and responsibilities for the funding partnership. The BART board approved this agreement at their meeting last week. This $200,000 contribution from BART, along with $150,000 that was reprogrammed through the Measure J strategic plan amendment approved last October, gives us a total of $350,000 needed to resume and complete the design for the overcrossing project. Agenda item 11.2 is a contract amendment that adds this $350,000 to agreement number 358 with Mark Thomas for completion of design services. for the overcrossing project. The amendment also extends the termination date from June 30th, 2018 to June 30th, 2019. The additional budget to the design contract will allow for completion of the design for the overcrossing and also to modify the design to not preclude any elements of the future transit center. And also it includes a high-level conceptual layout of the transit center. Completing the design will help us better compete for funding for construction, which is estimated to be approximately $8 million. In addition to BART's support, the ACRFA is also supporting the project financially in providing right-of-way support services. In summary, Agenda Item 11.1 seek authorization for the Chair to execute Cooperative Agreement 05E.14 with BART for the funding partnership in an amount of $200,000. For Agenda Item 11.2, staff seeks authorization for the Chair to execute Amendment Number 1 to Agreement Number 358 with Mark Thomas in an amount of $350,000 for a new total agreement value of $872,000 for final design services. This amendment, again, extends the termination date to June 30th, 2019. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a great project for Brentwood, and the only way I could see it being improved is if it were a requirement that, as a condition of our funding approval, that Mayor Bob Taylor be the first one to be photographed biking over the new pedestrian bridge.
And scootering maybe too.
So with that condition, I'll move the item.
Now, we've got to take each item separately, correct?
Yes, the first one is for the co-op with BART.
That was my motion.
Oh, for both. Okay.
Second.
On 11.1, right?
For 11.1, it's the co-op.
With that condition, I'll either walk, crawl, or ride, whichever, whatever it is.
That amendment is acceptable to the maker of the motion.
We have that in writing, I guess?
So I have a first and a second on 11.1. Call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Then we go to 11.2.
Move 11.2.
Second.
I have a first, I have a second. We'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And thank you so much. That's
Good job, Sam.
been a long time.
There has to be a photograph involved, or it doesn't count.
Oh, I wouldn't miss that. We'll get that photo of. Don't worry about that. 12.0, Connected Vehicle, Autonomous Vehicle Program.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. My name is Tim Hale, the Deputy Executive Director for Projects, and happy to be here to talk about our Redefining Mobility program and the upcoming state funding that's going to be coming into the program. The authority was appropriated $3.5 million in the 2017 State Budget Act, AB 97, for Gomentum Station. These funds were made available to the authority as a grant for use in planning, construction, operations of autonomous vehicle testing. The grant will be administered by the California State Transportation Agency and the Secretary of Transportation. So our redefining mobility goals for Gomentum Station were foundational to the grant agreement, focusing on economic growth and job creation in Contra Costa. And through collaboration with the agency and authority staff, the following vision and goals were developed for the grant agreement: create a world-class connected autonomous vehicle test bed with active industry and government participation, provide public benefits to advance mobility, enhance safety through autonomous vehicle technology, expand economic development, opportunity, job creation in California to advance autonomous vehicle technology, and partner with the public, private sector to enhance safety, mobility, and the environment. And through those goals, the team developed 3 major grant objectives: minor improvements to infrastructure to support partner demonstrations at Gomentum Station, such as additional traffic control and wireless communication, completion of the SAV demonstration project, and program administration. So the grant obviously has a lot of requirements that are associated with it. We have to have a dollar-for-dollar match of non-state funds. The work plan and expenditures must be for planning, operations, and construction. Allocation requests must include work plan budgets and approved by the authority and the agency. And the expenditures must conform to the terms and schedule outlined in the grant agreement. There's also reporting associated with the grant agreement. We have to do quarterly performance reports to make sure we're tracking progress relative to the goals and objectives in the grant agreement. And then at the end of the grant agreement, once all the funds are encumbered, quarterly authority should provide a report to the Secretary of Transportation and the Joint Legislative Budget Committee by January 10th, 2020, outlining how these funds were spent and the public benefits that were achieved with the funds. So the funds must be encumbered by June 2020, and local match will be contributed by Momentum Station partners. And then with the staff was actually very successful in negotiating the ability to use in-kind services as a match as well, which is very uncommon with these types of agreements. So the grant was set up with the flexibility to do reimbursement or advance payments, and allocation requests will be submitted from Momentum Station to the authority with work plan, budget schedules, documentation for local match. Invoices will be included for reimbursement allocations requests, quarterly reporting of advance payments, and the agency requires that all the allocation requests that we bring forward have to be approved by the authority board. So in the grant agreement, the work plan and expenditures that are outlined is management and administration, which includes the program management, day-to-day operations of Momentum Station, regulatory approvals, and research. The SAV planning, which includes test plans, procedures, and requirements for the completion of the shared autonomous vehicle demonstration at Bishop Ranch. Also includes testing for facilities design and construction. So this would be the design and construction of minor roadway improvements, additional traffic control elements, and vehicle to infrastructure wireless communications. So the grant funding combined with the local match is a total $7 million investment into the Momentum Station and autonomous vehicle testing program. And the grant agreement also provides the flexibility to modify the terms and scope and expenditures of the agreement as long as there's consent mutually agreed upon between both parties. The grant agreement outlines years of expenditures for the scope and objectives in the agreements. And then looking ahead, we'll be bringing forth updated cooperative agreement with Momentum Station that's consistent with the grant agreement. We're also working with the City of Concord to update the MOU to include a commitment of long-term agreement for in the future. And so since the grant agreement actually is backdated to October 2017, which was another successful negotiation point, Momentum Station and CCTA staff are preparing a reimbursement request for basically October to December, and then we're also preparing an advance allocation request. We'll bring both of those to APC and board in the upcoming meetings. So the action today is we're asking for the authorization of Executive Director to execute the agreement number GMS 001 with the state in the amount of $3.5 million to expand the development of AV testing at Momentum Station. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Yeah, thank you for that report. It was unclear to me, both in the staff report and the PowerPoint here, specifically where the local match monies were coming from and how those were broken down. I couldn't figure out what pots of money were being asked to dip into for that.
So the local match will be a combination of all the partner money that's being used at Momentum Station. And so when we bring forth all the future allocations, we'll actually have a breakdown of all of the local match for each of the allocations in the future. So that would be contributions from the partner agreements into Momentum Station. And so that money will be used at Momentum Station's discretion, and they'll submit allocation requests to staff, and they'll be able, and then the Momentum Station staff will be able to show proof that the local match meets all the requirements in the grant.
So those partners include the City of Concord?
I'm sorry?
Was the City of Concord putting part of the local match, any funding from the City of Concord, just from folks who are out there doing their testing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd move the item. Oh, but
Can
our
I-
executive director wants to add something.
Can I add something real quick? Because I'm reading this, and I thought about this last night. This grant, the way it's kind of evolved, is it's actually coming to the board. It probably shouldn't be me signing the agreement. It probably should be the board chair attested by Terry Ann, because it's all the budget actions have to come to you anyway. So it's an agreement with us, not with staff. It's with us. That's
Right, with the agency, that makes sense. I guess the question I'm going to ask him, I don't know, Ryan, but when we get the grants and the funds on Momentum Station, who's pulling the strings money-wise? Are we in charge of the money? Some people I might not want handling that.
Yeah, so it takes an action. So when the money comes in and expenditures are requested, like paving or restriping,
Right.
Habib Shamsku at Stantec and Jack Hall agree, and they both sign the work orders, and then Jack negotiates the price, because that's kind of what we do, right? Work with contractors, and they'll fill in the areas that need striping, or they'll restripe it, or they'll go in and hire a contractor to repave certain areas to fix dips where they don't like the profile. And then he negotiates price for things like spraying, or you have to mow the road because there's not enough traffic, so weeds grow up out of the road and it fools the sensors. So Jack and Habib have so far done that. They're in the process now at Momentum of hiring a board, or getting a board on board.
Okay, because I was just curious, with so many people involved now, or?
It's getting more and more chaotic.
I would
Jack's
think-
schedule is
I would-
maxed out. There's a bunch of people that want to, companies that want to test on the same day. Some request testing in absolute obscurity so nobody else can see what they're doing. And some apply for today, for example, so 2 vendors are supposed to be there. But if the things they're working on don't pan out, they don't show up. So it's.
And I would just say in the future meeting, when we bring forward the master cooperative agreement with Momentum Station, that agreement, because everything is getting so complicated, that it'll outline better the roles and responsibility between CCTA, Momentum Station, and it also give procedures in terms of staff coordinating with Momentum in terms of allocations, expenditures, budgets, and also the ability to audit Momentum Station expenditures to make sure that's consistent with the state funds. And so that's all be outlined in the cooperative agreement.
I think the thing that hasn't been said out loud and needs to be said out loud is that Momentum is a separate 501c3 nonprofit, and we are working as the public agency in collaboration with them. And because we are now starting to get public dollars that are going into this nonprofit organization, that's why we've got to formalize this relationship. And otherwise, most of the expenses, or virtually all of the expenses, are being paid for through the folks who are partnering with us and testing out there. We have not put any of our dollars at CCTA into this yet, but we will be, because we're going to accept the grant. So now we've got to set up an organizational structure that does all the proper accounting and approvals for that. And we're in the process of that. And that's what Tim's talking about, is we're going to bring back these agreements in the next month or two, I guess, and formalize all of that.
And that's the reason I brought up Tim, and I knew Randy would get me on it, and bring me kind of how it all works, because I think we're getting a whole lot of people involved, and then the money pot seems to be getting larger, the good, the bad, whatever. But and for CCTA, if we're covering that, any admin costs come to help us, or?
Yeah, so the board authorized a small amount of money initially to help jumpstart Momentum Station, with the idea that ultimately it becomes self-funded, and which is rapidly becoming that way. And so the idea is to get somebody else's money, to leverage somebody else's money to grow this, so we can create jobs, have a relationship with university. Another university, Carnegie Mellon, has expressed interest in partnering with Momentum Station to bring their students, their grad students up to do testing. Hopefully there'll be a long-term relationship between Carnegie Mellon and Northeastern University. And so it's starting to do what we thought it would do 5 years ago, but it's taken a long time, it seems like, just to get it to here. And now it's kind of chaotic, but it's a good kind of chaos.
So I guess the question I'm asking you, and then I'll get off of it, but I'm also learning. So we're going to form a board? Who's we?
No, we are not forming a board.
We're not forming
a 503C requires a structured board. That's part of the nonprofit status. And so there's some invitations that have gone out to people in industry around this area to help manage the day-to-day activities. So that's occurring now, and the city of Concord was invited to put a representative on it, but it's probably not going to work well there. But we're going to get the city of Concord more involved into the day-to-day kind of activities through our next MOU. It's going to be hopefully a longer-term MOU, and the goal is to try to get some corporate investment into Gomentum Station, and then build a structure of staff and then a board to oversee it, a relationship with the city of Concord and the county of Contra Costa to try to bring some jobs here. We're okay salespeople, but we're not really, those kind of salespeople. We're not into real estate and where the empty spaces are and how do you develop this stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question, is the contemplation that nonprofit board would include a representative from CCTA?
Yes.
It would. At
Yeah,
least
as long as-
one, maybe two, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's still open. That's
Yes.
that's an empty canvas right now.
That's right.
Okay, all right.
Great. I would just go back to move the item again, but I would just add, as our executive director mentioned, that the signing authority needs to be modified, so it comes back to chair for those. But I just say this really is where we want to be, and while staff has worked really hard, Habib and others in Stantec, it's amazing that it is on the world map. As I said, coming back from China, and again, no credit from me, 2 weeks afterwards, the second largest manufacturer in China is now testing out there and has become a partner, and I'm really impressed by our small organization to be able to put this together. And we're just on the precipice of really,
Not precipice.
I shouldn't say that. We are on really the edge of something that is really going to be extraordinary. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for CCTA and a fantastic opportunity for the city of Concord. So I'd move the item of those changes.
I have a first and I have a second, and now I'll close with a comment. Tim, that was great. I even understood it. And so if you don't change nothing, the board would, that's a great representation. I would hope we would all say that, because it's quite explanatory. So with that,
Can I just add one more thing? And now I understand that local in this context means money from car makers in China, which was the thing that I was struggling with, the idea of locality. And now I get it, and it's perfectly fine. Thank you.
No.
Oh, you got your light on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. No problem now. Oh, okay, we'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Correspondence, news clippings? We good to go? Commissioner, staff reports? Well, I know you are. You're up.
I don't normally say anything, but I will. I wanted to remind the board that we were working on 4 things. We're working on succession planning, working on how to adapt to change, because that's always kind of difficult sometimes for government agencies, better internal communication, but teamwork. And so Terry Ann's here today, and it's a good example of teamwork. So Christina called in because her daughter Lily is ill, and she couldn't make it. She called, I don't know when she called Terry Ann, but Terry Ann came in at 6:30 this morning to cover. And, that's really, it's a great culture. I'm just very proud of that the team here will cover for each other, and, that whole teamwork concept is pretty cool. So she's here because, and she called me at 6:30 because she couldn't get in the building because her key wouldn't work right. And so I was on my way anyway, so we got in. But I just want to give the team credit for having great teamwork. And these Gomentum Station and these AAA and all this stuff is just kind of a part and parcel to having a good team, good culture. So thanks.
Chair?
This is a tailgate. Yes, ma'am.
Did you kind of went kind of fast over commissioners' reports, comments?
Go.
I have a comment.
Okay.
So I just want to say that I'm the new chair of WICTEC, and I look forward to working collaboratively with all of you here at CCTA, and I'm open to any advice you can give me. I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, you've been around a long time, so you know kind of how it works. Believe me, they'll tell you and me and everybody else we're pretty sharp, and we're here to help you also.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
And then in response to Randy, I just wanted to let you know that your board's sitting here. If she's sick or something, we'll all get here at 6:30 in the morning, fix coffee. We'll come across. We're a working team. All right, other business? We'll adjourn. Next meeting will be March 1, 2018.